If you're looking for the best phone to buy in 2024, you're probably looking at either the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the S24 Ultra, or the Google Pixel 9 Pro XL. So, which one's better? Well, they each have their own positives and negatives. So in this video, I'll be comparing everything from their design, display, camera, all the way down to AI, battery, and price to help you guys decide. Also, we're giving away an iPhone 16 Pro Max, an S24 Ultra, and also a Pixel 9 Pro XL in partnership with our longtime partner, Bitdefender. More details later in the video. Okay, so starting off with the design, you'll see that from the front at least, the iPhone and the Pixel look almost identical, whereas the S24 Ultra has this more rectangular shape. They all look unique from the back here, and they're all easily recognizable from a distance. After all, each of these companies have had more or less the same design over a number of years now, with some minor tweaks. Personally, I do prefer the Pixel's design more, as it is more symmetrical than the others, but that is simply a matter of taste. There's also a difference when it comes to their frames, with Google having this polished aluminum frame, and then Samsung and Apple both having this matte titanium frame. Now, after holding all of them in my hand, I gotta say, the Pixel does feel the most comfortable here. That's because it's got the narrowest frame, and on top of that, it's got these rounded corners that follow the contour of my palm perfectly, so it honestly feels great. The iPhone is similar, but since it is wider, it is also not quite as comfortable. Whereas Samsung has these very sharp edges that actually dig into my palm, so for me, Samsung is actually the least comfortable. However, Samsung does offer you the largest variety of color choices, whereas Apple and Google only offer you 4. Design, of course, is very subjective, so do let me know which one do you prefer. For me, that is the Pixel. Now, when it comes to their display, if you just read their specs on paper, it may make you think that the iPhone's got the largest display at 6.9 inches compared to 6.8 on the other two. But using all three, I can tell you that the S24 Ultra feels like it's got the bigger display. And that's probably due to the squared off corners, which did give me this kind of like mini monitor experience when watching content. And speaking of watching content, I've literally lowered the camera exposure because I've maxed out the brightness on all of them. And as you can probably tell, the S24 Ultra is the brightest when watching HDR content compared to the rest. The iPhone is in second place and the Pixel is the dimmest. So if you like seeing these super bright and vibrant colors when watching HDR content, then the S24 Ultra is going to be the best choice here. Now, since we're talking about the brightness, let's talk about the outdoor brightness too. And here, the story is pretty much identical to the HDR brightness. Samsung is by far the brightest and the easiest to see, followed by the iPhone, and then the Pixel, which is quite dim. Even more so when watching videos outdoors. Also, the S24 Ultra is the only one that has an anti-reflective coating, which actually does wonders outdoors. Now, a lot of people talk about the maximum brightness, but very few talk about the minimum brightness, which for me does have a big impact when I'm trying to read at night in pitch black. And here, despite the iPhone's 1 nit of minimum brightness, the Pixel can go like 4 times dimmer, and then Samsung can go to an insanely dim level from where I even struggle to recover, as I can barely even see the brightness toggle. Other than that, these displays are all very similar. They've all got 120Hz refresh rates and always-on functionality, which Samsung and Apple actually do best, as they're the most customizable. Google's one is just very basic. Apple does have the fairly unique dynamic island, which does take up quite a bit of space, but then it also animates to show you things like food deliveries, the timer, and more. In some cases, this can be quite useful. Whenever I've got an Uber coming, the fact that I can see the time until it arrives right there at the top without having to manually open up a side-by-side window is quite useful. Now, the iPhone does have the thinnest bezels, then the Samsung, and then the Pixel, which has some fairly thicker ones compared to the other two. However, Google does have a more compact text font by default, so you'll actually get to see about the same amount as on the iPhone, probably even a bit more, and definitely more than on the Samsung. Okay, so about that big iPhone 16 Pro Max, Pixel 9 Pro XL, and S24 Ultra giveaway of ours, this is thanks to our sponsor, Bitdefender. These devices are clear examples of peak technology. So we partnered with Bitdefender's expert community, where tech fans can hang out and get involved in threads about tech and cybersecurity. The community also offers insights from Bitdefender experts, cybersecurity professionals, and peer-to-peer support. This allows members to share experiences and solutions with each other. They've even gamified the forum so that the most engaged users become Defenders of the Month. To enter the giveaway, existing and new users can win by joining Bitdefender's Innovators Quest contest hosted right here. Simply submit your idea for a security feature or product. There's even a prize for just casting your vote. Check out the link in the description for more info on how to enter. But that's not everything. I'm going to be hosting an AMA on Bitdefender's expert community forum. So sign up, find a thread, and ask away. Answers will be posted on the 10th of October. So what about their camera? Well, let's start with their main module. Samsung has a massive 200 megapixel sensor as opposed to Apple's 48 and Google's 50. But when we take a look at the actual results, you'll see that the iPhone's actually the most detailed. And that's because it takes all of its photos at a default 24 megapixel resolution, whereas the other two take it at 12. However, there are some occasional exceptions here, where the iPhone will look softer than the Pixel. Although, for the most part, the iPhone is still going to be sharper. Now, you can also put the others in high resolution mode, however, Samsung's 200 megapixel image doesn't really give you much more detail. In fact, the Pixel seems to be the one with the most detail here, whereas Apple's is overly sharpened. In terms of image processing, in general, I do find the Pixel to be the best here, followed by the iPhone and then the Samsung. Just take a look at how well the Pixel managed to expose the inside of the light bulbs. I've also noticed that the iPhone tends to usually be brighter in almost all photos compared to the Pixel and the Samsung, which I personally do prefer. If we switch to night mode, the results are very different, as this time the Pixel tends to be the brightest, followed by the Samsung and then the iPhone. Personally, I do find the Pixel's night mode to be way too bright and very different to what I was seeing with my own eyes, so the iPhone and the Samsung do tend to look more natural here. And between the two, the iPhone does consistently have less noise, so for night shots, I prefer the iPhone here. All in all, they all have some great main modules, but the iPhone and the Pixel tend to be superior to the Samsung thanks to their sharper images and less noise at night. When it comes to their zoom modules, they all have 5x modules, the only difference being the resolution and Samsung having an additional 3x module. And here, even at 5x, the Pixel and Samsung are both better than the iPhone, with less noise and a sharper image overall. At longer ranges like 30x, that's where Samsung shines, with far more detail than the iPhone and the Pixel, which are surprisingly close here, and even at night, Samsung still has more detail. So zoom-wise, Samsung is definitely the best, especially considering that it also has that additional 3x module. When it comes to the ultra-wide, they're all very similar in terms of their field of view, but I did find the Pixel to have less noise and just a bit more extra detail compared to the other two. Although at night, I much prefer the iPhone's image, as the Pixel is just way too bright once again, and the Samsung is overly noisy. As for macros, which their ultra-wides enable, the iPhone is by far the best here, as you can take considerably closer up shots that are also much sharper. All in all, I'd give the ultra-wide to the iPhone here. In terms of their front camera, the Pixel is my favorite. The highlights in the background are perfectly exposed, which are blown out on the Samsung, and while the image is not as sharp as Samsung's, it is sharper than the iPhone's. Plus, if you use the wide-angle view of the front camera, the Pixel is going to be able to capture the most. Perfect for group selfies. Right, so this is a front-facing camera test between the iPhone 16 Pro Max, the S24 Ultra, and the Pixel 9 Pro XL. So let me know which one handles the highlights better. Yeah, the iPhone actually blew out the sky quite heavily compared to the Pixel and the Samsung, at least from the preview. And the Pixel is also the widest, as you can probably tell. So let me know which one looks better, but then also which one sounds better. So this is the sound coming out of the iPhone 16 Pro Max. This is the sound coming out of the Pixel 9 Pro XL. And this is the sound coming out of the S24 Ultra. In terms of back video, as you can probably tell, they all look very similar, with the iPhone being ever so slightly sharper and with a tiny bit more shadow detail than the Pixel and the Samsung, although you'll honestly be very happy with either of them here. Night video is noticeably better on the iPhone. The Pixel is the worst by default, but if you enable nighttime video, which takes a couple of hours to process, the footage will end up looking miles better and superior to Samsung's. However, the iPhone is still cleaner here. On top of this, the iPhone also has superior special modes like cinematic mode and action mode that are noticeably higher res on the iPhone. The iPhone can also do 4K 120 in both regular shooting and slow motion shooting. Samsung can also do 4K 120, but that's only in slow motion. Samsung does have 8K video support, which the Pixel also has if you let it process for a few hours thanks to Video Boost. However, unless you've got an 8K TV, I think most of you will find 4K 120 and unique features like ProRes log and the ability to record on external SSD, all features that the iPhone has, more useful. So yeah, for recording video, I'd say the iPhone is overall the better choice. Now, when it comes to portrait mode, they're all very good when it comes to capturing a person. Apple and Samsung tend to do a slightly better job with their edge separation. Apple and Samsung can also use their 5x modules for portrait shots, which look absolutely stunning. I think Apple's doing a slightly better job here with a sharper image and a more natural look. Now, if you like taking portrait mode shots of pets, Samsung will give you a better result with an almost perfect fur separation, whereas Apple will give you a more realistic focus falloff. And if you use portrait mode on objects and plants, Google seems to do an incredible job here, although it does have considerably less background blur than the other two. This can all be adjusted in post on each phone, by the way. As for the camera app itself, I prefer the Pixels, as it's the simplest but at the same time quite powerful. It's got features like Add Me that let you add yourself into a group photo even if you're the one taking the photo, a Best Take that automatically picks a smiling face in a group shot, and a number of useful photo taking features too. Samsung's UI is more advanced but also more complex, whereas Apple is a bit convoluted, and some controls like the flashlight and night mode are repeated twice for whatever reason. Now, they do feature photographic styles which let you capture your photos in a predefined look, but Apple doesn't have any unique camera features that Google does, like Add Me or anything like that. So it's hard to pick a winner in the camera department, as they've all got their strengths and weaknesses. But if I had to pick, I would pick the Pixel for photos, the iPhone for videos, and the Samsung for zoom and portrait shots. And by the way, if you love the wallpapers that you're seeing throughout this video, they're all from our app Wallpapers, linked down below. Now, when it comes to performance, if we take a look at just the raw performance, the iPhone's the fastest, followed by the Samsung and then the Pixel, which is trailing quite far behind the other two. However, in real-world usage, they all feel great, and they're all crazy snappy and fluid to use. What I have noticed though is that the iPhone specifically tends to keep fewer apps open in the background compared to the Samsung and the Pixel. Part of this is having less RAM, but I do think part of this is also iOS 18's RAM management, as it used to be better on iOS 17. Now, if you like playing games on your phone, in some cases, like Genshin Impact, you will get some advantages on the iPhone compared to the other two, in the sense that it is the only one that can do 120 frames per second at the highest possible settings as opposed to 60 on the other two. On top of this, you can also enable Metal FX, which is essentially Apple's upscaler, so it dynamically adjusts the resolution based on your gameplay, so you'll get even smoother frame rates if you enable that. And honestly, playing at 120 FPS just feels amazing on the iPhone. It's just crazy fluid. Now, between the Samsung and the Pixel at the exact same settings, Samsung does perform better, as we tend to get about 60 FPS more often compared to the Pixel, which usually sits around 50 to sometimes even 40 or 45. So yeah, the Samsung is definitely the more consistent one. But out of the three, the better option is definitely the iPhone here. Okay, now when it comes to unique features, they each have their own. On the iPhone, I think the best one is Face ID, which I much prefer over a fingerprint reader, as I do find it to be faster. There's also the remappable action button that you could configure to do almost anything from turning on the flashlight to even opening your garage door. You technically have this on the Samsung too. You can remap the power button to do different things. In this case, open up a specific app, although it's not quite as advanced as Apple's action button. Then there's also the dedicated camera control button, which honestly I do find to be a gimmick, as I can simply just do all of these haptic controls much faster by just using the touchscreen. It is useful for quickly launching the camera, which by the way, you can also do on these other two phones by quickly double tapping the power button. And lastly, there's this LiDAR sensor on the back, which most people will never even know what it is and what it does. Well, it basically makes tracking in augmented reality apps better. That's mostly it. Now, Samsung's most unique feature is, of course, the S Pen. Personally, I've only used it on a few occasions to sketch some furniture measurements, but some people do use it extensively for taking notes. Samsung also has the strongest multitasking, as you can open up 3 apps at the same time, as opposed to just 2 apps on the Pixel and literally just 1 on the iPhone. Samsung also lets you have folders in the app drawer, once again one of my favorite features ever on a phone, whereas on the iPhone and the Pixel, you can only have these on the home screen. And we also get some really useful features such as circle to search, although this one is a Google feature, so it does work on other Android phones too. Speaking of Google, the only unique hardware feature is this object temperature sensor, which honestly I've never used aside from showing it in videos. Other than that, all of its unique features are in terms of software. So we have things like the Screenshots app, which lets you quickly find items that you've screenshotted in the past, although I've also never used this. So really, my favorite unique thing about a Pixel has to be its haptics. It's got by far the best haptics out of the three, which Google uses throughout the entire UI, and I also find it to have the best typing experience out of the three because of those haptics. Okay, now a big part of each of these phones is of course AI. And we've got Apple Intelligence on the iPhone, Galaxy AI on the Samsung, and Google AI on the Pixel. And they're all similar but different. Apple Intelligence isn't even out yet, so unless you're on iOS 18.1 beta, you won't be able to use it. And most features will only come out in future releases next year. Now, if you are on iOS 18.1, the only notable thing that you'll get is writing tools, which allows you to proofread the text or condense it, summarize it, or even rewrite it in a different style. And you also get the ability to remove certain objects from photos. I found the text summary to work quite well, and I do like that it works in any app, but the photo editing removal is very poor as it fails most of the times. And do keep in mind that this is still all in beta. Samsung's AI features are far more advanced right now, so the text summary also works in different apps, and it's very similar to Apple's, although you need to be using Samsung's keyboard or Samsung's own browser. I tend to use Google's keyboard, so I cannot really use those features. And same goes for Samsung's photo editing features. You need to be using Samsung's Gallery app to make use of them, but they do work better than Apple's. And you can also move objects around, not just delete objects. My favorite thing though is being able to draw pretty much anything using the S Pen, and then using Galaxy AI, it will generate that object for you. This actually works quite well for me, although I haven't really used it much aside from showing it in videos and, on a few occasions. Google's AI features are by far the best, I would say. Gemini, for example, is really helpful at a number of tasks. It's very similar to ChatGPT, just built in. And Gemini also works in apps like Gmail or Docs, which I have used on a number of occasions to compose text, although sadly, Google's text generation tools do not work in third-party apps. Google's photo editing tools are by far the best, so they work basically the same as Samsung, but you do get some additional features like being able to regenerate portions of an image, which you simply do just by typing, and to be honest, this actually works really, really well. I have found myself to use this more than Samsung's drawing feature, although erasing objects and just moving things around is what I found to use the most. So I'd say for AI, Google is definitely the best, followed by Samsung and then Apple, with all of them basically having the same AI features, text generation and image editing. I should also mention that while Apple's AI is free, Samsung is only free until the end of 2025, same for Google's, after which, at least for Google, you will have to pay $20 a month to use Gemini Advanced. If you don't pay for it, you'll lose access to AI features in Gmail, Docs, and all of the other Google first-party apps. When it comes to the battery life, from my usage, the iPhone and the Samsung seem to last the longest. But if you want some actual numbers, TechChap did a great comparison, and in his test, the iPhone lasted the longest at 11 hours and 29 minutes, whereas the Samsung and the Pixel were basically neck and neck at 9 hours and 15. As for fast charging, none of them feature anything crazy here. Samsung charges the fastest to about 60% in 30 minutes if you use their 45-watt charger, whereas Apple's and Google's, they charge to 50% in 30 minutes. Wireless charging is surprisingly the fastest on the iPhone at 25 watts, followed by the Pixel at 23, and then Samsung's at 15. However, both of these require their own proprietary charger. MagSafe for Apple and the Pixel stand for the Pixel 9. Weirdly enough, Google does not sell the Pixel stand anymore, so you technically cannot get that 23-watt wireless charging speed anymore unless you already had one. Now let's talk about their price. The iPhone 16 Pro Max starts from $1,200 for the 256GB version, whereas the Samsung starts from $1,300 at the same storage, and the Pixel starts from $1,100, although for $128. If you want to get a 256, that will cost you $1,200, so same as the iPhone. I should also mention that Samsung constantly offers you deals on their website, so you can get the S24 Ultra for quite a bit less, and then Google also has some great trade-in deals. Plus, Samsung and Pixel, they will be far cheaper if you buy them later or used, as opposed to the iPhone. So if we talk value, I'd say the Pixel is probably the best here, especially if you consider the offers and or the used market. But in terms of which one to pick, that fully depends on what's most important for you, as they've all got their pluses and minuses. So let me know, after everything that we've discussed, which one would you go for? Don't forget about the giveaway with Bitdefender, link in the description, and stay tuned for more videos. I'm Daniel, Zone of Tech, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Zone of Tech, signing out. Cheers.